Welcome to today's explainer. When we picture true financial freedom, we often imagine that corner office feeling, total prosperity, peace of mind, looking out over a sunset city skyline, knowing your wealth is just quietly working for you. But how exactly do we get there? That's where things get a bit complicated. Today, we're diving into the cold, hard data behind one of the most fiercely debated topics in the entire personal finance world: dividend investing versus index funds. So is one of these objectively better for long-term wealth accumulation, or is the reality a whole lot more nuanced? Let's find out.
Picture this. It's a random Tuesday morning. You're checking your brokerage account. You haven't made a single trade. You haven't checked the financial news. You haven't really done anything at all. But there it is, a cash deposit. It was generated automatically by the companies you own, literally just because you own them. For a lot of investors, this feeling of passive income arriving without any active effort, it is deeply, deeply satisfying. Honestly, it's almost addictive. But the big question is, does that powerful psychological satisfaction actually translate into better long-term wealth? That is exactly what we are going to unpack.
Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll meet our two investor personas. Second, we'll look at the actual mechanics of a dividend. Third, we'll dive into the data. Fourth, we'll tackle the tax complication. And finally, we'll cover some practical portfolio solutions.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the two investor personas.
To really ground these abstract financial concepts, let's look at human behavior and meet two completely different investors, Owen and Rachel. So Owen discovered dividend investing about 3 years ago. His portfolio is heavily focused on utilities, financial companies, and real estate investment trusts, or REITs. His goal is super simple: build up a stream of passive income large enough to cover his living expenses without ever having to sell a single share. It makes his investing journey feel really concrete and purposeful. Now, on the flip side, we have Rachel. Rachel invests exclusively in low-cost, broadly diversified index funds. She doesn't track dividend income, she doesn't screen for yield, she just buys the entire market and leaves it alone. Mathematically, her approach is incredibly broad, but let's be honest here, it is way less emotionally engaging than Owen's. So who actually has the better strategy?
Section 2, Mechanics of a Dividend. Where does the cash actually come from?
Before we can declare a winner, we really have to ask a foundational question. When that cash lands in Owen's account, where did it actually come from? Well, brace yourselves, because the answer is a massive expectation reversal. When a company declares a $1 dividend, on what's called the ex-dividend date, the stock price mathematically drops by exactly $1. Think of it like this. If you own a share worth $50 before the dividend, your total wealth is $50. Right after the dividend, you own a share worth $49, plus you have $1 of cash sitting in your account. Your total wealth? Still exactly $50. A dividend is not free money. It's just a mechanical transfer of existing wealth from the share value directly into cash. And this actually perfectly illustrates a Nobel Prize-winning economic theory from way back in 1961 called the dividend irrelevance theorem. Franco Modigliani and Merton Miller essentially prove that in a perfect market, how a company distributes its earnings, whether they pay dividends, buy back shares, or just reinvest in their own growth, is completely irrelevant to your total wealth. At the end of the day, what actually matters is your total return. That's the combination of price appreciation plus any income.
All right, moving to Section 3, the data. Index versus dividends.
So if dividends are mechanically just a transfer of value, what happens when we look at the actual historical data in the real world? Well, this brings up a major hurdle for Owen. It's called sector concentration risk. By focusing purely on dividend-paying stocks, Owen's strategy systematically overweights sectors like utilities and financials. But here's the kicker. It simultaneously underweights the exact sectors that have driven massive market returns over the last couple of decades. Think about high-growth tech giants, companies like Amazon, Meta, and Nvidia. For almost their entire histories, they paid little to no dividends because they chose to reinvest all their cash back into the business. Rachel's broad index fund owned all of them automatically. Owen's dividend portfolio? It completely missed out on that massive price appreciation.
And you know what? The research backs this right up. If you look at comprehensive data from Vanguard and Spiva tracking rolling 10 to 20-year periods, broadly diversified index funds have consistently outperformed dividend-focused strategies in total return. Plus, research by Rob Arnott and Cliff Asness found something pretty counterintuitive. Higher dividend payout ratios were actually linked to lower subsequent earnings growth. Basically, the companies that kept their cash and reinvested it simply grew faster than the ones giving their cash away.
So mathematically speaking, Rachel's broad diversification frequently beats Owen's self-imposed dividend constraints. But hey, we need to maintain perfect impartiality here, because dividend investing absolutely does have genuine academic merit, if it's done correctly. Research by Professor Robert Novi-Marks highlights what's called the dividend growth factor. Companies that consistently grow their dividends over 25-plus years, often called the dividend aristocrats, exhibit incredibly high quality and profitability. They have rock-solid balance sheets and durable competitive advantages. That is a very robust strategy. However, we have to contrast that with the very dangerous high-yield trap. If you're out there chasing an 8 to 10% yield in a 5% rate environment, that is a massive red flag. It usually means the broader market is fully expecting a very painful dividend cut.
Section 4. The tax complication. Let's talk about the reality of tax drag.
See, academic theories love to assume we live in perfect, frictionless markets, but we live in the real world. And that brings us to a variable that is absolutely crucial to understand: tax drag. Dividends are taxable events, period. When Owen gets that sweet cash deposit, he owes taxes on it that very year, even if he has his account set to automatically reinvest it. In a regular taxable account, this creates a systematic drag on his compounding. Every single year, a little piece of his return goes straight to the government. Rachel, holding an index fund, defers her capital gains until she actively decides to sell a share. So her wealth just compounds completely uninterrupted for decades. Vanguard's data confirms this tax efficiency gives index funds a huge, systematic advantage in taxable accounts. Which brings us to Section 5, Practical Portfolio Solutions, applying all this nuance. So, we've got the theory, we've got the data, and we understand the tax reality. How do you actually apply this to your own personal wealth management? Well, you can follow this simple 3-step framework. Step 1, you need to clarify what you are actually optimizing for. Are you aiming for the maximum mathematical total return, or do you need that behavioral predictable cash income to keep you sane during a market crash? Step 2, if you do choose dividends, focus strictly on dividend growth and high-quality companies. Run far away from those high-yield traps. And Step 3, carefully consider your account type. If you love dividends, put them in a tax-advantaged account, like an IRA, to completely eliminate that annual tax drag we just talked about. All right, let's bring it all home. After 20 years of investing, whose portfolio is actually larger? Owen's or Rachel's? Well, based on the sheer weight of historical data, broader diversification, having that tech exposure, and the obvious tax efficiency, Rachel's index fund strategy very likely wins on paper. She generated more total wealth. But wait, here is the completely impartial truth. Owen's portfolio did something absolutely incredible for him. It gave him regular, tangible income that made his investments feel real. That psychological satisfaction, that might be the exact reason he didn't panic and sell everything during a brutal market crash. Remember, the best strategy isn't just the one with the highest theoretical math. It's the one you can execute consistently through good markets and bad for decades. For Rachel, that is the index fund, no question. But for Owen, his emotional satisfaction and behavioral sustainability make the dividend portfolio his perfect strategy. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. If you decide that the psychological power of dividend investing is the right path for you, how do you actually identify those high-quality companies with sustainable, growing dividends and avoid those dangerous value traps just waiting to slash their payouts? Well, that is exactly what we are going to unpack in our next explainer. Until then, keep learning and stay focused.
Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful or inspiring, please take a second to like and subscribe. Your support helps us create more content that informs, inspires, and entertains. We truly appreciate you, and we can't wait to see you in the next video.